The morning my brother tried to steal my grandmother's house, I was already sitting on the evidence that would put him away. I didn't walk into that notary's office blind. I want to make that clear from the start. Because what happened that day looked like a miracle to everyone who witnessed it. And it wasn't. It was 3 weeks of work. 3 weeks of staying quiet when every part of me wanted to scream. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Ivy. I'm 32 years old. I work as a cybersecurity analyst for a mid-sized insurance firm in Columbus, and I am very, very good at finding things people try to hide. My brother's name is Sawyer. He's 28, charming in the way that only truly selfish people can be. The kind of charming that makes you want to believe him even after you've caught him in the third lie. Our mother's name is Renata. She raised us alone after our father left when I was 11 and Sawyer was 7. She did her best. I used to believe that. I used to repeat it to myself like a prayer whenever she would look right through me to smile at him. Sawyer was always the favorite. Not subtly, not in the soft way some families operate. Openly, obviously, the way the son favors one side of a house. He got the better bedroom. He got the car when he turned 16. He got tuition paid for 2.5 years of a communications degree he never finished, while I worked a campus job and took out loans for my computer science program. When I graduated with honors, my mother said, "That's nice, honey," and spent 40 minutes telling me about Sawyer's new apartment. I stopped keeping score somewhere around my mid-20s. It was exhausting, and it changed nothing, so I just built my own life. Good job. Small but comfortable condo. A therapist I see every other Tuesday. A cat named Biscuit, who does not care about anyone's family dynamics. My grandmother, my father's mother, not Renata's, was a different story entirely. Her name was Agatha. She was 81 years old, sharp as a tack, and had approximately zero patience for nonsense. She lived alone in a 4-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood in Dayton that she'd owned outright since 1987. She had a garden that took up most of the backyard. She made chicken and dumplings from scratch. She called me every Sunday at 7 in the evening and asked me real questions, not how's work, but what are you reading and what made you happy this week. Agatha knew about Renata. She knew about Sawyer. She never said anything cruel. She wasn't built that way. But sometimes she'd squeeze my hand and say, "You turned out remarkable, baby girl, and you did it yourself." That was enough. She passed away in February, quietly in her sleep, the way people who have lived well sometimes get to go. I cried for 2 days straight and then I went back to work because that's also how I'm built. Her will was straightforward. The house went to me. There was a small savings account that went to a local animal shelter she'd volunteered at for 15 years. There was a piece of jewelry for a cousin I'd never met, and there was a note, handwritten, tucked inside the will's envelope, that she'd left specifically for me. It said, "You were the one who showed up." The house should belong to someone who knows what home means. Don't let anyone take it from you. I read that note 4 times in the parking lot of the attorney's office the day I found out. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my wallet where it still is. The house was worth, at the time, approximately $340,000. Not a fortune. Not nothing. Sawyer found out about the will 2 weeks after Agatha's funeral. I don't know who told him. Maybe Renata, maybe some other branch of a family I'm not close to. But he found out, and 3 days later my mother called me. She used her soft voice. That's how I always know something is coming. Her normal voice is clipped and efficient. Her soft voice is warm and slow, and it used to make me feel, when I was small, like I was finally going to be chosen for something. I learned eventually that the soft voice just meant she wanted something. "Sweetheart," she said, "Sawyer and I have been talking about Agatha's house." I waited. It just seems like, and I know Agatha meant well, she always meant well, but a 4-bedroom house for one person doesn't really make sense. And Sawyer has been going through such a hard time lately, the job market, you know? And he mentioned he might want to settle down, start a family. "Mom," I said, "I just think it would be the generous thing, the family thing to consider. Mom, the house is mine. Agatha left it to me." That's not a conversation. The soft voice evaporated. "You've always been so rigid," she said, and hung up. I sat with that phone call for a day. I talked to my therapist about it. I cried a little, not because I was going to change my mind, but because it still hurt. The way it always hurts when you hope, even slightly, that this time will be different. And it isn't. Then I got a very strange email. It came from a generic Gmail address, the kind with random numbers attached. and it was addressed to someone named Burgess at a notary firm I'd never heard of. I was CC'd. The email body had been forwarded. Someone had clearly hit reply all by accident or out of sheer carelessness, and when I read it, my vision went a little white at the edges. It was Sawyer's email address in the from field of the original message. He was asking about the process for handling a will signing when one beneficiary cannot be located or is unwilling to participate. He mentioned a document. He mentioned a property in Dayton. He was asking how to forge my signature on a transfer deed. Not in those exact words. He was sloppy, not stupid. But I spent my career reading between the lines of digital communication, and what he was describing, an authorized representative signing on my behalf based on a power of attorney document I had absolutely never signed, was fraud. Clear, prosecutable fraud. I didn't call him. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call anyone. I went to my laptop, opened a fresh document, and I started a file. Here's the thing about working in cybersecurity. You develop a very particular relationship with patients. You learn that the worst thing you can do when you've discovered a threat is to react immediately. Immediate reaction tips off the actor. It destroys the evidence trail. It makes you look emotional and reactive in any subsequent proceeding. The right move is to document everything, preserve everything, and wait until you have a complete picture before you make a single move. So that's what I did. I contacted the notary firm mentioned in that forwarded email, not as myself, not initially, but as a potential client, just to confirm they existed and were operating. They were. I then called them directly, identified myself, and explained that I had reason to believe someone was attempting to use their services to facilitate document fraud on a property of which I was the legal beneficiary. The woman I spoke to, who had the measured tone of someone who has seen a great deal of human ugliness in a professional capacity, asked me to come in. I came in. I brought a copy of Agatha's will. I brought the forwarded email, printed and time-stamped. I brought a brief document I put together. Because this is what I do, showing the IP address associated with the original email traced back to Sawyer's home network. The notary's name was Ms. Okafor. She was perhaps 60, with reading glasses pushed up on her head and a way of listening that made you feel like every word was being carefully filed. She read through what I brought her. She looked at me over her glasses. "When is this appointment scheduled for?" she asked. 3 weeks from Thursday, I said. "According to the email chain?" She nodded slowly. "And you would like to be present?" "I would like to be present," I confirmed. We worked out the details. Ms. Okafor would proceed as if nothing were unusual. She would allow the appointment to go forward. She had already, by that point, contacted her firm's legal counsel. I left her office and drove home and sat in my car in the parking garage for a while, just breathing. Then I called a detective I'd been referred to through my firm's legal department, someone who handled white-collar fraud cases. I laid out everything. He asked me to keep documenting and to contact him if anything changed. I didn't sleep well for 3 weeks. Not because I was scared, exactly. More like the way you feel before a long flight, this low-level alertness that won't fully quiet down. I went to work. I fed Biscuit. I called Agatha's attorney to make sure the deed had been properly recorded in my name, which it had. I did not respond to Sawyer's text message asking how I was doing, the first text he'd sent me in 4 months. The morning of the appointment, I got up early. I wore a gray blazer over a white shirt, practical shoes. I wasn't dressing for drama. I was dressing to be taken seriously, which is its own kind of armor. I arrived at the notary's office 20 minutes early. Ms. Menses Okafor met me in the back, showed me where I'd be waiting, and confirmed that Detective Harlan and a colleague would be positioned nearby, available within minutes of her call. I sat in a small conference room with a glass of water and my phone face down on the table, and I waited. I heard them come in. Sawyer's voice first, that easy, practice laugh he uses when he's working someone. Then my mother's voice, softer than usual, performing a role. I couldn't make out the words through the door. I didn't need to. I knew the script by then. Ms. Okafor's assistant came to get me after about 7 minutes. "They've presented the documents," she said quietly. I stood up. I picked up my water glass because my hands needed something to hold, and I walked through the door. The look on my brother's face is something I will carry for the rest of my life. Not with pleasure, exactly. With something more complicated than that. He was sitting across the wide mahogany table from Ms. Okafor, a manila folder open in front of him, a pen in his hand. My mother was beside him in a cream-colored blouse, her reading glasses on, leaning forward. They both looked up when the door opened. My mother's expression cycled through about 4 things in under a second. Surprise, calculation, something almost like guilt, and then a hard kind of blankness. Sawyer just went pale. "Hi," I said. I sat down at the end of the table. "Ivy." My mother found her voice first. "What are you, Ms. Okafor asked me to be here," I said. "I'm the legal property owner. This is a document related to my property." Sawyer had not moved. The pen was still in his hand. "That's a power of attorney form," I said, nodding at the folder. "Can I see it?" Miss Okafor slid it toward me. I looked at it. The signature at the bottom bore my name in handwriting that looked approximately like mine. If you didn't look carefully, if you weren't me, if you hadn't spent 32 years signing your own name. I set it back down. "That's not my signature," I said. "I've never signed this document. I was never contacted about this document. I did not grant anyone power of attorney over this property." "Ivy, you're being," Sawyer started. "I have the original will, recorded with the county. I have the deed in my name, recorded with the county. I have a forwarded email from 3 weeks ago in which you asked this firm how to handle a signing when a beneficiary is." I looked at him, unwilling to participate. "I have the IP trace from that email." The room was very quiet. My mother said, very softly, "You have no idea what pressure Sawyer has been under." "I'm not talking to you right now," I said, not meanly, just as a statement of fact. Ms. Okafor reached for her phone and made a quiet call. She didn't have to say much. 2 minutes later, Detective Harlan and his colleague came in through the side entrance. Sawyer looked at the detectives. He looked at me. He looked at the forged document still sitting in the center of the table. He said, "Ivy, come on, we're family." I looked at him for a long moment. He had our mother's eyes, warm brown, the kind people trust automatically. I used to trust them too. "Yeah," I said, "we are." I picked up my water glass and leaned back in my chair and let the detectives do their jobs. Sawyer was charged with attempted deed fraud and forgery. My mother was charged as an accessory. She had, as it turned out, signed off as a witness on the fake power of attorney document, which made her directly culpable. Their attorneys spent several weeks trying to negotiate. In the end, Sawyer received 18 months probation and a substantial fine. My mother received a suspended sentence and community service. Neither of them served jail time, which I had mixed feelings about. But the DA explained that for a first offense with no completed transfer, this was the likely outcome. I sold the house 6 months later, not because I didn't want it. I did. I genuinely did. But because Dayton is 2 hours from Columbus, and I couldn't maintain it properly from a distance, and I didn't want to watch it fall into disrepair. Agatha would have hated that more than a sale. I used a portion of the proceeds to pay off the remainder of my student loans. I put the rest into a high-yield savings account and a modest investment portfolio. Practical, unglamorous, exactly what I needed. I have not spoken to my mother since the day in the notary's office. She sent a letter about 2 months after the charges were filed. I recognized her handwriting on the envelope. I stood at my kitchen counter for a while, looking at it. Biscuit came and sat on my feet, which is his way of checking in. I put the letter in the recycling bin without opening it. I don't feel good about that, exactly. I don't feel bad about it either. I feel like someone who finally stopped standing in a doorway waiting to be let in and just went somewhere warmer instead. My grandmother's note is still in my wallet. I read it sometimes when things are hard. "You are the one who showed up. Don't let anyone take it from you. Nobody took it. The house is sold, the money is mine, and I'm doing just fine." I've thought a lot about what made Sawyer believe he could get away with it. He's not unintelligent. He knew I worked in cybersecurity. He knew I was detail-oriented, careful, the kind of person who reads the fine print. And he still tried it, still sat down at that table with a forged document and a pen in his hand, like the outcome was already decided. I think the answer is that he'd watched me absorb things my whole life without fighting back. The missed birthdays. The tuition that went to him and not to me. The years of being the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who didn't make scenes. He mistook endurance for weakness. He saw someone who kept showing up and staying calm, and he thought, she won't push back. She never does. That's the thing about people who take from others without consequence for long enough. They stop being able to imagine a different outcome. They lose the ability to account for the possibility that the person they've been underestimating has been paying attention the entire time. I had been paying attention for years, honestly, not in a bitter scorekeeping way. I genuinely tried to let go of most of it. But paying attention is just part of how I'm wired. It's how I do my job. It's how I move through the world. And when I saw that forwarded email, when I read those words about an authorized representative and a power of attorney I had never signed, every year of quiet observation snapped into focus at once. What I did next wasn't revenge. I want to be clear about that. It wasn't about making Sawyer suffer or watching my mother's face go pale across a conference table, though both of those things happened. It was about protecting something that was mine, something Agatha left me, not because I was her biological granddaughter, but because I had shown up consistently without being asked for years. She saw that. She named it in her handwritten note, and I was not going to let anyone erase that. There's a version of this story where I call Sawyer immediately, confront him, give him the chance to back down. I used to think that version would be kinder. I don't think so anymore. The kindest thing I ever did for myself was wait, collect everything, walk into that office prepared. Because the truth is, if I tipped him off, he would have denied it, deleted the emails, and I would have had nothing. Just a family conflict that made me look paranoid and difficult. Patience wasn't passivity. It was strategy. I won't pretend the aftermath felt clean. There were nights, in the weeks after the charges were filed, where I'd lie awake and think about the versions of my mother and brother that had existed when I was small. The mother who braided my hair, the brother who followed me around the backyard. Those people were real too. Grief doesn't require that someone dies. Sometimes you grieve the version of a relationship you wanted to exist and never quite did. But here's what I know. The choices they made were theirs. I didn't push them toward that notary's office. I didn't put a forged document in front of them. They looked at something that belonged to me, that my grandmother gave me with intention and love, and they decided it should be theirs instead. That's a choice with weight. Choices like that don't disappear just because you're family. They accumulate. They define you. Agatha's note said, don't let anyone take it from you. I didn't. That's enough.